to CP Newsroom. I'm Nicole Menzi. The Rev Van H. Moody, pastor of the Worship Center Christian Church in Alabama and author of the new book, The People Factor, says it is time we do relationships right. While many of us may have our relationship with God down, some of us likely have anything but healthy relationships in our homes, at our jobs, and maybe even at our churches. That is where Pastor Van and his new book, The People Factor, come in. Welcome, Pastor Van.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So first off, why do you call this the people factor?
Well, because one of the most important factors of anyone's life will be their ability or inability to relate well with people. Everything in our life revolves around people. Anything that we desire to do, whether it's in the business sphere or the relation or the leadership sphere or even the Christian sphere, revolves around relationships. So it is the most important factor, second only to God, and I call it the people factor.
All right. So one of the first principles I think you lay out in the book is the necessity for us to be honest and sincere in our relationships. Why is that a big factor?
Well, because trust is the greatest foundation of any healthy relationship. And trust is created in atmospheres or environments where transparency and realness is appropriate. When individuals feel like they're in an environment that is not trustworthy, then they will be reticent to be themselves, to be vulnerable, to be open and transparent. And without that, no relationship can really thrive and be ultimately successful.
Okay, and I like the example you use in the book. And you're applying this to all relationships,
Exactly.
Even the casual ones where, we say, hi, how are you? And you say, I'm fine, everything's great. And we don't actually mean it. You say, right. Even in those situations, it's necessary to just be real.
Yeah, because often we don't realize how easy it is for us to be insincere. And that kind of protocol, if we're not careful, carries over into our dealings with all people at all times. And so sincerity and transparency is not something you can put on and put off. It's something that literally has to be ingrained in who you are and practiced every day.
Okay. So how does God use relationships to carry out his plans and purposes for our lives?
Any and everything that God has ever done and will ever do in the world, he does through people. You see this throughout all of the Bible stories. We understand that God is in heaven. We understand that God is very powerful and he works in the world, but his work in the world happens through people. Right. And that's one of the most important things that we often forget, which heightens the importance of us being able to do relationships well. Because the inability to do that will also threaten the very thing that God wants to do in your life, whether it's in business, whether it's in your personal life, or even in your professional life in a number of other areas.
Okay, so how do we identify poisonous relationships? If we're feeling dragged down every time we're around someone, should we assume that this is something I need to cut off?
Well, one of the things that we have to understand, first of all, is who we are. I start the book by talking about the law of being real, because you first have to have a good assessment of who you are at your core, because that is what you carry into every relationship, and that's also kind of the common denominator with which you evaluate the people that you are in a relationship with. Are we compatible? Do we share the same core values? That's extremely important in the business sphere, but it's very important even in platonic relationships. And once you have a good handle on that, then you can begin to assess whether it's good compatibility, whether the compatibility has ended, or maybe the relationship rather needs to transition and move on.
Okay, so what about, good relationships, healthy relationships that, add value to your life? What do you do to maintain those and to make sure you're not just taking, but you're also giving as well?
Well, every healthy relationship has to involve what I call a win-win scenario. It takes giving and taking. And when you have those components where both individuals are mutually benefiting from the relationship, right, then the relationship kind of moves to the next level that I call synergy. And that's extremely important, whether it's a platonic relationship or even a professional one. Excellent business relationships have that synergistic kind of vibe, because we're able to accomplish more together. Synergy is to relationships what mathematics is. 2 plus 2 is 4, but 2, times 2 just takes the relationship to another place, and that's what synergy does.
Okay. So let's talk about the church, for instance. Good relationships are vital in the church from
Absolutely.
The top down.
Yeah.
But what are some dynamics people can encounter when, you got sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so who, there's just this wall or this clashing? How do you foster healthy relationships in a church environment where you're supposed to be a family?
I think, first of all, you have to be intentional about it. And then I think you have to understand that there are critical factors that make relationships healthy. And once you have that understanding, I call it a relational IQ. Relationships are not easy. And what I've learned is that most people, while we are accomplished in several areas, we lack the acumen that we need to do relationships well. So once you understand those principles, you can then begin to apply them to every aspect of your life and be intentional about doing, whether it's a church relationship, any other relationship, with that set of skills. And those are the things that will help that relationship to be healthy.
Okay, I'm wondering if maybe you can give us an example then. Looking to Jesus, relationships are all over the Gospels, you know.
Very much so.
His ministry from the beginning. So maybe, I don't know, can you give us a couple of things to look at when we're looking to the Gospel accounts of how Jesus interacted and moved with people?
One of the most important ones is sacrifice. And a lot of times we do relationships from a very selfish perspective. And when you look at the model that Jesus establishes about how to do relationships, one of the most important hallmarks is sacrifice. That the more we are selfless, the more we're willing then to invest in the relationship. And then it's reciprocal. When two individuals are willing to sacrifice in a relationship, then neither individual is depleted. Because as you're willing to sacrifice and as I'm willing to sacrifice, your needs are met and so are mine. And Jesus demonstrates that, particularly when he talks about it's more blessed to give than receive, when he talks about the more important position is not to be first, but to be a servant. And I found, even outside of the church world, I found even in the business community, that if you adopt those principles, it exponentially will add value to the work that you do, because you can establish greater relationships and connections with the people that you even seek to do business with. So I think that's one among several principles that I talk about in the People Factor, that if people understand and apply, it'll not only change their relationships, but it'll also change their life.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Pastor Van, for your insight and this very important book. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you for tuning in to CP Newsroom. See you next time.